importance of planning your deployment strategy, and we will share with you some key facts on how to approach it. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Vera Temkov from Citrus. I'm working with AX since 2010, so 12 years of experience and mainly on the technical side, including the ILM processes. I'm also a country manager for the Citrus team located in North Macedonia. On today's presentation, we also have, as you heard, my colleague Tanja. Tanja?
Hello from my end as well. I'm Tanja Petrovska, a developer in Citrus for both IX and D365 FO. Among the development tasks, I'm also part of the ILM team for keeping the environments in excellent shape.
Thank you, Tanja. And before we start with the actual presentation, let's set some expectations so you would know if you're in the right session. Are you or your manager sleepless when production update is happening? Or do you lack of control for what is actually coming to production? Have you experienced that the other systems that you have in your application landscape are being impacted unexpectedly by the update that you have applied in AX or D365 system? Well, this session will lack in deep configuration details for configuring a deployment process, but we will discuss the key areas you need in order to establish a stable lifecycle process, and that will be the foundation for a successful AX and D365 FO application. We will guide you what to consider when you are preparing a deployment strategy and to ensure that your strategy works before and after go live. And what would be the purpose and the key benefit of having a deployment plan and strategy? That is by having full control, stability, and predictability. What we will cover, to be precise, we will see in the agenda below. We will talk about what is ILM, then why environment planning is important, then about the Azure DevOps tool. We will present you some diagrams as part of the deployment strategy and explain about the Microsoft updates as part of the maintenance process. Then we will talk about LCS, Lifecycle Service role in supporting your deployment strategy overall. And at the end, we will summarize the key facts so you have them ready to use in your AX and D365 projects. Let me put up some scenarios here. Let's say you have your AX or D365 FO application in your landscape, but do you know how to maintain your application? Or maybe you want to implement new features. So you do some customizations. But what is needed to perform a smooth transfer of those customizations to production? Then why Microsoft updates are important? Or maybe you want to implement new features or do some customizations, but what is needed to perform a smooth transfer to your customization and have a deployment plan and strategy even before your live? And one more question here. Do you know which environments are needed as part of your deployment process and when? Knowing all these answers will lead you steps closer in the ladder to a successful management of the application cycle in its whole life cycle. That process of managing the application is known as ILM, Application Lifecycle Management. ILM is an important part of the chain of processes for successful project and a stable application. One of the considerations in the AX and D365 FO projects is environment planning. Why is the planning of environments so important? It is because it has direct impact to your project itself. In the project timeline until you go live to production, but also post-go live, you will need different environments to be provided and be active in different stages of the project. So you plan when to activate them depending on your project timeline, depending on your project complexity and your project scope. Then, will you perform any development changes maybe? Do you know how many development environments you would need for those customizations? Planning and how will you manage those environments has a crucial impact to your application stability. Knowing how to manage them, how to perform the code deployment, and when to apply Microsoft updates will definitely help you to have full control over your application, leading to a successful go live and post go live support. Environment planning has direct impact to your budget. You need to plan how many cloud-hosted environments will you need, because you know you're paying for them on Microsoft Azure subscription. Or maybe you will choose to have a hybrid approach. This is an approach if you want to host the deployment environments in your premises instead of cloud hosting them all. Also, you want to avoid any project delays because you discover late in the project cycle that you would need an extra environment. So you want to plan them in advance by knowing in which stage of the project you want to activate them. You are paying only when the cloud-hosted environments are active. So you don't want to have them active all the time, right? We will talk about this planning and these actions during this presentation. Then, the environments also have impact to the team size and structure. It is important to clarify ownership and who will manage them. Who will take care of them and keeping them up to date with Microsoft updates? Who will control the transferring of the custom code and updating the environment with fresh data prior to the testing? All of this is important so the team members can deliver their task and know their responsibilities. Each environment has a purpose. Environment purpose represents why certain environment should exist in the application topology. For example, the DevBox environment is an environment where the developer performs development changes. In the second one here on the list, in the build environment, we do the code preparation, where we merge and branch the code that we want to promote. The test environment is for testing, like the sandbox environment. Then UAT, we have an environment for performing the user acceptance testing. And then a production environment and a support environment, which is a frequent copy of production. And now that we have all these environments listed, do we know how to structure them and track all of them? That would be by having a document that is maintained throughout the whole project. In that document, you structure and plan which environments you need, their purpose, and when. To build the environment plan, you need to start by defining the milestones in a timeline based on your project plan. Then, next to it, you add the activities that are required a supporting environment throughout the implementation. For example, develop customization in development environment. So you add those activities as such. Next, you continue with considering when those environments will be required. How long will they be active and retained? Following all this, you will have a living document that will be revisited regularly. And for this purpose, Microsoft has produced a sample Excel document that you can use and adjust depending on your project. And we have shown here a screenshot of that document, but it has several worksheets. When we talk about the maintenance of environments and governing them, we talk about keeping them up to date with applying Microsoft service updates. With the Microsoft updates, not only that you have improved existing functionalities, but with Microsoft updates, you also have new features. You will need to test them, how they work with your existing business processes. Then, maintenance covers deploying of custom code. You don't apply them directly in production. You need to have them first tested and transfer those code changes, right? Then we continue forward with performing data refresh. By this, we are referring to the testing processes, where prior to each testing, you need to update your test environments with valid data in order to have reliable tests. In the context of having reliable tests, keep in mind the impact of the third-party applications you have in your landscape. When I'm saying third-party applications, I'm referring to the other applications that you might have in your landscape that are communicating with AX or D365 FO, and that will have impact to your business processes. And as a last point here, I will mention implementing ISV updates. If you have any verticals installed in your AX or D365 FOL application, you will need to keep them up to date as well. So all of this goes to application lifecycle management. This application management, it's a process that starts from the very beginning of your project. You will need an environment for your fit gap analysis, where you plan the business processes. We already said that you might need multiple environments in order to have a smooth transition to production, but they will vary depending on your project and your project complexity. And then you continue to plan them in an environment plan that we mentioned. And you are constantly managing and operating with your environments till go live. After go live, you will need to support your production environment, meaning support your business needs, perform development or configuration changes. But also, we don't forgot the applying of Microsoft service updates to keep the application up to date. You need to have a structured ILM process, and that will definitely help you through the whole process to ensure stability and predictability that you need from the very beginning till after go live. Before we see the diagrams that we have prepared for you representing the deployment strategy of code, let's talk about the Azure DevOps platform and the different phases in a release cycle. In each project, we start by planning the business processes and their flow in the application. Then you continue with develop phase, where custom code is developed if needed, or maybe the requirements are met by using the existing configuration options. Then you test those implemented changes and verify that the business requirements are satisfied and working as expected. And I will just mention here in the test phase the importance and the impact of the third-party applications and the data that these tests are performed on. Once you're confident that you've tested successfully the processes, you continue in the deploy phase of the cycle, where you transfer the code to production. The maintenance phase is where you operate and use these newly implemented processes in production, and where you keep in mind the Microsoft service and quality updates. Further, this release cycle continues depending on the nature and the complexity of your project. All of these phases that we just saw are being logged and tracked in Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps represents a central piece of the puzzle of the ILM processes. This is one of the platforms that, together with LCS, Lifecycle Services, will support your deployment strategy. Azure DevOps provides services for allowing the team to plan their work by defining work items. And the work items are representing your business requirements that you want to implement, or maybe defects that you want to correct. Then you classify them by release, meaning when you would like to see them ready in production. There are services that enables us to track the progress and have a better overview of the release status. We will show some samples in this presentation. Also, Azure DevOps has a set of services where the developers can collaborate in code development and have code versioning possibilities, as well as it's supporting the testing and the deployment processes. The team can collaborate with an interactive backlog where each team member can see their activities that are pending on their name. They can see the status that they're in, the release tag, and other details that they might need. Having this overview, each team member will improve the time for delivering their work, and by that minimize any project delays. Also, here is an example of a process flow chart that you can configure in your project in Azure DevOps. They are easily configurable, so you have a complete overview of the stage of the project that you're in. You can see, are things in development, are they tested successfully, or are they moving forward in the release process? With this rich set of services in Azure DevOps, you can do so much more. But for the goal of this presentation, we will not go into further details of Azure. And now that the environments have been identified and we have our environment plan, Tanya will cover how we define the flows for building and moving the code and the data across the different environments.
Thank you, Vera. Now, as Vera said, I will continue with the deployment strategy and the maintenance part. So, the deployment strategy is unified and secure process of deploying code to production. The yellow boxes that you can see on the screen represent the different environments and their purpose in a project infrastructure, like development box environments, build, test, and UAT environments, and lastly, we have the production and support. So the developers are implementing the code changes in their DevBox environment. When the developer has completed the development testing of their modified processes, the code changes are committed or checked in. After check-in, those code changes are part of the development branch. As the next step of the deployment process, a selection should be made which code changes are branched out for the next release, meaning that only these code changes will be promoted to production if they are tested successfully further in the process. Next, we have the build environment, where those code changes are compiled and built as part of the final code preparation. Then they are installed first in test and then in UAT, so they can be further tested. And once the user acceptance testing process is complete, a sign-off step is needed to confirm that the users are satisfied with the outcome of their testing and the code is ready to be deployed to production. And for the support environment, that is the copy of production. So this way you can have a mirror of process testing as you would have in production. For example, if you want to check and verify as outcome of a certain behavior or functionality without impacting the production data, you should do that in the support environment. So all of the testings performed on the environments needs to be reliable. So that is why you need to have a fresh data from production. The data refresh is being performed on different frequency depending on which environment is being performed on. So for example, the support environment is being refreshed most frequently. Depending on the business needs, it can be daily or a weekly refresh. Then the test and the UAT environments are being updated with production data right before the testing process starts. And as for the dev boxes, there is no exact timing for the data refresh. They are being updated with data on demand. So in order to have reliable results for testing, we mustn't forget the importance of Microsoft updates. Microsoft updates must be applied on every environment present in the project infrastructure. So it is important that your environments are up to date prior to the testing, because this way you can verify that your business processes are compatible with the latest changes from Microsoft. Together with the data refresh, the Microsoft updates are playing a crucial part in keeping the environments healthy, and through that have a reliable test results from your code changes before they are being released to production. You can plan when you need to apply these updates by referring to the Microsoft release schedule. There is the link on the screen. You need to apply every update because through continuous updates, Microsoft is providing both improved reliability to existing functionalities and also new features to your environment. So this is part of the concept one version and continuous updates. So your environments are being updated with 2 major releases per year and other monthly service update. So the total of the Microsoft Service update per year is 8. After applying any Microsoft update, you should verify and test those changes before they hit production. The release cycle that Vera explained earlier in the presentation is also valid for applying Microsoft Service updates. You start by planning your updates using the Microsoft release schedule. Next is the develop phase, and the code in the service updates is already developed by Microsoft. So you just need to apply the updates and continue to the testing phase, where you will ensure that these new changes are working seamlessly together with your business processes. And I want to mention here that you can test your business processes either manually or by automate testing. And lastly, you deploy the changes to production. The maintenance of environment is an important part of the ILM process, but let's not forget that you might have other application in your landscape. So D365 is the key element of your business application landscape, but depending on your business, you might have third-party application working together with D365 FO. The complete landscape shown on the diagram represents D365 FO, but also the other integrated application that will have a production impact. This third-party application and ISV solution should be included in your end-to-end testing process. Depending on your project and what impact they have on your business processes, you should consider if they are vital to have them as part of your test and UAT processes. And so far, we have talked about all the steps that are needed for a successful ILM process, but do you need to have some sort of a fail-safe? So even if your application are running smoothly and your ILM deployment strategy is in place, you still need to consider having a disaster recovery plan. This would mean to think about what to do if something goes not as planned with your release promoted to production. So should a hotfix change be applied or should the changes be revoked completely? Let me share one example. So the production is updated, but one functionality cannot continue as such, and that functionality was impacted with the latest release. So in this situation, you have the option to revoke the changes, but what is important here are the transactions. They might be corrupted or lost completely. So you need to think about if you can continue with that kind of loss. And also, what about the other integrated application that you have? Are they being impacted with this code failure? So these are some of the questions that you should consider when preparing the recovery plan. It will be your guide to make a quick and smart decision. Now that we have covered the deployment strategy and maintenance, let's talk about the role of the lifecycle services in supporting your deployment process. Lifecycle Services is a central portal with set of services that allow you to perform the ILM actions across different D365 FO implementations. So LCS integrates Azure DevOps and your environment, and you will have a complete overview. Also, from the LCS portal, you can see and apply Microsoft updates, software deployable packages, perform data refresh, and many more options. LCS integrates all of these pieces to fit together and work in a cohesive manner. One of those pieces is also the methodology which your project will be based on. When you create a project for your D365 FO implementation, you start by selecting the purpose of the project. So depending on the purpose, different methodology will be represented to guide you through the implementation project. On the screen, you can see a sample of creating a new project and choosing a purpose. You can choose between implementation project or upgrade project to D365 Finance and Operations. On this slide, we have an example of methodology for D365 FO implementation project. This implementation methodology relates with the release cycle that we have explained in the prior slide of the presentation, as you can see by the project phases in the top. There are 5 crucial phases suggested in this methodology: analysis, design and develop phase, test, deploy, and lastly, the operate phase. What is important here to mention is that Microsoft is also representing one step deeper to see the actual step within those phases, along with a brief discussion of what is expected of that step. Also, you can see an overview of the task history and mark each of them as complete and continue further. The methodology itself can be adjusted and edited depending on your project needs. So now that you have created your project, in LCS, you can define the links to access the different environments as part of your project. In the screenshot, you can see a project overview with the associated environments. On the right side, there is a production environment and a sandbox test environment. If you click on the full details underneath them, you can quickly go to your environments and then perform the necessary maintenance. So on this screen, you can see all information regarding the selected environment, like manage environment, Power Platform integration, available updates, and lastly, monitoring. In the available updates section, you have an overview of the Microsoft updates that are available, but not yet installed to your environments. Furthermore, you can maintain your environment by applying updates and many more options. Vera, can you share your screen again? We have lost the connection.
Oh, sorry. Just a sec. This is what happens when we are live.
Yeah.
I will share. So hopefully we can see the presentation again.
Yeah, you can go one slide back. Yep, here we are. I will continue. So you will not have a remote desktop to access your production environment, and all the updates are being applied via deployable packages. So on the maintain option, you can apply updates, and you also have many more options. The deployable packages can be found in the asset library. So the asset library represents a repository where you can store various files like your custom code as software deployable package or your production database backup. The Microsoft updates are published in the software deployable package tab, so they are ready to be used for your implementation. There are 2 types of asset library available in LCS. the shared asset library and the project level asset library. The shared asset library is used by Microsoft and partners to share assets across multiple tenants, projects, and environments in LCS. And the project level asset library is used to share assets across environments within a project in LCS. This library can be accessed by all users within one project. So among the asset library, there are more tools that are available in LCS. I will not go into the details of each one of them, but I want to mention some that can help you with your ILM strategy. One of them is the Cloud Hosted Environments tool, which you can use to deploy Microsoft Dynamics environments on Azure. When you use cloud hosted environments, you must select the type of environments you want to deploy. It can be a demo environment, a development test, or a production environment. Furthermore, in LCS, you can use the issue search that helps you find existing solution and workarounds for known issues in Microsoft Dynamics products. You can see which of those issues have been fixed, which remain open, and which have been resolved as one fix. So there is a lot to talk about the deployment strategy and the ILM process overall, but we have reached for the last session for today. So Vera, let's summarize what we have shared in this session.
Thank you, Tanya. We are a bit fast, but for this purpose to wrap up, we will use the golden circle, starting by why we want to share these exact considerations with you, so you can have smooth transition to production, but also a stable post-go live support. Then you will have a clear predictability, what will help you to eliminate the possible risks and that will be impacting your project budget, your project timeline, and your project team. How will you achieve all of this? It is by having an environment plan. With that, you will know in advance how many environments you would need, when will you activate them, and you will avoid or minimize any project lead time due to the environment is needed in a very last minute. Then have a deployment strategy for moving your code and applying Microsoft Service updates. Tanya explained the diagrams that we have prepared for the code deployment flow. The scale and the complexity of your project will depend on the complexity of the deployment strategy, but for sure you will need to keep your environments up to date with the latest Microsoft service and quality updates. Also, have an organized way of working during the whole application lifecycle, using Azure DevOps and LCS to support your strategy. This way, every participant will know its duties and roles in the process, and by that, they will be able to deliver better quality of work. Following all this, you have defined your ILM process flow, and you will have a smooth and successful application lifecycle management. Thank you for listening to this session, and thanks to the Power community for giving us the opportunity to share our knowledge with you. Now let's see if we have inspired you with some questions. So me and my colleague Tanya will make sure to give you an answer for that. But also do not hesitate to contact us via LinkedIn or our emails for any further debates. If I open the chat, and see if we have any so far.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Tanya. Okay, I think the first question is by Adrian, saying these are quite a few environments which, for example, would be difficult to pay for a small company. What is the basis on which the respective infrastructure is considered? So basically, I think what Adrian is saying is there's a lot of environments, and would you require so many environments for, say, a small company? Can you give any advice, guidance on that, for example?
Well, of course, they are not cheap, but what you get for the 20 users, you get a production environment and you get a sandbox environment, and you can try to host your development environments in your premises in order to minimize that cost. But for sure, you cannot directly deploy changes to production. You want to have a stable process. You want to minimize any risks. So I would advise to host them in your premises, the development environments, then test them in the deployment process, in the test environment before they are deployed to production. But for sure, you would need a structured way of working and to minimize any impact in your production.
Thank you. Kishore is asking, we also need to deploy code in support environment after deployment of prod. So he's asking, do we need to do that? What is the sequence of applying? So yeah, so his first question is, do we also need to deploy the code in the support environment after the deployment into production? That's his first question. And then his second question is, what is the sequence of applying service updates from tier 1 to tier 2 and vice versa?
I will answer those. So yes, we need to deploy code in the support environment because the support environment is a copy of production. So when we are doing data refresh on daily basis, the code tables, everything needs to be the same. So I hope that answers this question. And the sequence of applying the service updates is from development, test, UAT, production environment, like we have in the release schedule. So the code in the service updates can be tested in test UAT together with the other applications and then applied to production.
Thank you, Tanya. So the next question is by Michael, who's asking, where can we find some information regarding automated builds?
Oh, Azure DevOps for sure. There are a lot of documentation on how to approach that. Azure DevOps provides possibilities and services for automating that process. So you can, have automated builds, and before that build is processed, also have some auto tests performed on the code. So feel free also to reach out to us. We can pinpoint to the right blogs, but for sure, Microsoft documentation, I think it has pretty heavy information regarding this automation process.
And there's a question by Declan who's asking, oh, well, actually, he's just sharing some information there. He's saying that for a mid-sized company in his organization, they have 4 VMs for development. They have 1 POC, 1 UAT, 1 prod, 1 golden configuration environment, 1 test environment, and 1 training environment. And they have a pipeline to maintain them. Do you have any comments to make on that, Tanya, Vera?
Well, all of this, I would say that depends on their project purpose, scale, what application that they have. I don't see a question here, but you know that this is a very specific to each company, each application. how heavy processes that they have and that they need to test. So it is individual, I would say.
Definitely agree, Vera. I've always seen a different configuration for nearly every single implementation, purely based on the amount of concurrent projects and numbers of users and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Any other questions? So Philippe says, true, you want to have your support environment identical to your production.
Yes.
Okay. So any other questions? We have 10 more minutes with Vera and Tanya. Any other questions, guys?
Well, I would say that usually our customers are asking how early they would start with this ILM process with the application lifecycle management. They are usually considering after go live just for support, or they're considering, oh, we need only support while we are in the project implementation. But as we said in the presentation, this is from the very beginning. When you start to plan your project, you need to plan your environments. You know, that has direct impact to your project budget and how much it will cost your project, and also the stability at the end of your production environment. So it's a whole cycle from, as I said, from the very beginning of the project plan and supporting your production environment, which is crucial for your business to keep it stable, keep it up to date. Tanya,
Excellent.
anything you would like to add about the other maybe considerations that we have so far?
Yeah, we usually get asked about the built environment. What is the difference for the built environment and why we are using that? We are, as I said before, we are using the built environment to prepare the code and build the code. But the main difference between the built environment and, let's say, the development environment, for example, is that in the built environment, you don't have the data. So in the development environment, you want the data so the developer can do his work. But in the built environment, you are just doing the code preparation and you don't need the actual data here. So that is the main difference between the built environments and the development or the other environments in the project infrastructure.
Very good comment. Okay, and there is a question by Jesus who's saying, sorry for the question. Is there any step-by-step or documentation about configuring pipelines in Azure DevOps for automated X++ builds for FinOps?
Well, I believe we have seen a previous question for that. There, I know for on this kind of sessions or conferences that people are presenting how to configure that, but I cannot point at this moment to any. Feel free to reach out to us. We for sure we will find one that can help you to configure that process.
That's actually a very good point, Vera, because we did actually cover that at the last boot camp.
Yeah, I have seen.
Yeah, so I'll try and find that for you and share the link in the chat there. Okay, so Philippe's asking the question about tier environments. So would you recommend a tier 2 or tier 1 for a test environment? So the purpose of the test is to test the customizations by the partner before release to the key users of the end customer.
Well, it depends on the heaviness of the processes that they are testing in the test environment and the other applications that they have in the landscape. We have experienced either one of them. So we have clients that have tier 1 as a test application, test environment, but also tier 2 environment. So it very much depends on the business processes and how heavy processes we are testing. And I saw that we missed one question above from Nico. What is the best way to bring the island pieces in-house? Well, is there a training plan? But I haven't seen a training plan as such for this purpose. That's why we are trying to present this topic. This is something that we do, we provide as a service, and that's why we wanted to share our experience and how we see the best practices that it should be. So also feel free to reach out to us if you need any other further details.
Fantastic, Vera. And thank you, Peter Propacek. So Peter is actually the one who actually did the presentation on the DevOps pipelines, and he's actually shared the YouTube video in the chat there for you as well. Okay,
Great.
Fantastic. Okay, so Vera and obviously Tanya, obviously we've got 5 minutes left before the end of the session. Would you, I think a very good topic that we can maybe have a conversation about with the community is version 1. One version, should I say, one version of because I know that's a big problem, right, for customers where they have their monthly updates. Would you like to spend a few minutes just sharing your thoughts about one version and keeping up to date with those versions?
Well,
Tanya,
I
would
can,
you add too?
yeah, I will start on that. First, the best part to keep up to date is to have a plan. Microsoft, as we shared in the presentation, has a link where you can see when the next service update is available. And this plan is up to a year, I think, for all the 8 service updates that is available through the year. So in order to keep up with those, you have to have a plan, and that plan depends on the frequency of your update of production. It should be in line with those updates or before them, depends on the business itself, really. But that is one way to keep up with the updates, and now we must update our environments because some of the processes may have been changed by Microsoft, and that is why we have to stay on one version.
I would like to add on that these updates require also a lot of testing, maybe for the end users. But they can automate the process of testing. I have already presented on that topic about the test automation process. You can search on YouTube on Vera Temkov, and you can see how you can ease that testing process. And today on the Frank was also sharing for the test automation process how it should be configured. So that is also one thing that we advise customers to follow through and to help them keep up to date and to ease their process somehow in verifying that what they are releasing to production that is stable and it's not impacting their business processes.
That's a very good point, guys. Well done. Yes, I completely agree because as Tanya mentioned and yourself, Vera, these monthly updates you have to keep up to date with those monthly updates. But I think it's also important for the community to be aware as well that Microsoft through LCS allows you to skip up to 2 months, right? 2 or 3 months, it allows you to skip the monthly updates. For customers that are doing that, that are skipping, say, a couple of updates, what would be your kind of guidance when it comes to their implementation? Do they have to be worried about certain things by skipping several updates?
Well, Tanya, we want to answer on this?
Well, the rule is to apply every update, and yes, we can skip 3 continuous updates, but that is the exceptions. And if you want to skip an update, you must refer to Microsoft and have a valid, in my opinion, have a valid reason for skipping the updates. So, as I said, it's an exception to the rule of applying every update.
And we're advising to keep to that rule.
Awesome. Perfect. Excellent, guys. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tanya and Vera. I think it was a very insightful session. I think a lot of people learned from this session. There's been lots of good questions. And I don't believe there's any more questions. So what I have to say is a huge thank you to Vera and Tanya from Citrus. And yes, we look forward to seeing you soon, maybe at an in-person conference in the near future.
Yeah, we would love that. We are anxious to see people in person. These kind of conferences, it's quite common now, but we miss those conferences in person.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thank you, Vera and Tanya.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you all.